Hello, welcome to the Square Base Show with your hosts, Rob and Val, and today we're going to be looking at the top 5 things that we want to see changed in the new FAQ.
Oh boy, things are getting frothy out there, Rob. There's wild speculation going on right now.
Well, yeah.
About this FAQ errata. It's a little overwhelming. What do you think?
Well, exactly. So if people aren't aware, and if you're just tuning in, hi, hello, great to see you. But if you aren't conscious, we are getting the unfortunately and not very imaginatively named Match Play Guide.
The MPG.
The MPG. The MPG. Which we've covered in a previous video. Please plunk the link. But we will be covering that obviously when it comes out. But that is our match play guide, and what it doesn't do is answer some of the great big questions that we'd like to see in the game. And obviously, Val, how have you felt about the ongoing or evolving meta of the old world? Obviously, at the launch of the game, there was very much like this army is good and this army is good, but we've had different arcane journals and we've seen definitely counter picks and counter metas emerge. Yeah. Would you say it's been an evolving meta or a pretty stale meta for the past 18 months?
It certainly has felt like it evolved to a point. I think when I look back to the fall, especially, you started to really see some meta reactions to big scary dragons and the stack save characters, specifically with things like poison archer blocks. You saw the rise of some attempts at like infantry Death Stars. So there's a lot of people out there saying that infantry's not dead. You just have to have
800 points
plus a bunch of chariots and a bunch of like your whole army just got to be in the brick. So like. The meta definitely has evolved. However, what I would say is that it still hasn't evolved to the place where the game necessarily, to like an outsider, especially again in like a play to win tournament environment, you're trying to score as many points and get all the kill points, etc. It probably doesn't right now. The game state doesn't really look right. You know what I'm saying? Like the vibes are great in this game. Like the camaraderie, the people who are playing and showing up at events. 10 out of 10 for me, but I could totally see someone, from the outside looking in being like, that's not my Warhammer. And I would suspect it's also, there's a metagame that's evolved that's maybe not what, the folks up in Nottingham, Nottingham's Ivory Tower necessarily envisioned as well. I don't know about you.
Yeah,
I mean, you see more events than quite genuinely than anybody. Like you've seen this, so what are your thoughts on it?
Oh, it's a great question. The meta itself, I think, there's so many factors that go into what dictate and decide a physical person event. You're about to run the S-Spot, which is our online tournament, right? But one of the differences between that and obviously playing in person is you can just be like, this week, I would like to play Warriors of Chaos versus playing, like Dwarfs X-Force or whatever it might be. Yeah, sure. That is the differentiation, is you can just play whatever you like. My experience of running more events than anyone in the world, some people say at this point, maybe 5,000 events is...
It's ticking up there.
Getting close.
Probably one event for each subscriber we've got. It's probably like 20,000.
Something like that. But either way, I generally tend to find that people commit to an army they like, and then they try to make it work. Like maybe that's just because I've got like a lot of regular attendees, but I mean like even people who are like very meta focused, like Ed, like jump around between different armies, but then still kind of not. Like there's several factors here, right? Which I probably don't need to explain to you, but to everyone else watching. Number one, cost. Like, do you really want to try that dwarf army out enough that you want to drop several £100s?
Sure.
So there's that. Time to produce. Do you really want to spend that time to produce it as well? Availability. Like, for instance, like I think the reason we haven't seen as many war wagons is people just don't generally pick up as many 3D prints as we think that they do. They pick up a few, but not loads.
We need to sell those.
Yeah, the war wagons. War wagons. So I think
battle barges.
Battle cars. Yeah. So
battle cars.
So yeah, that would be a number one factor, I would say. I would say the number one factor is just the sheer effort of producing a new army.
But the production meta, as you like to call it.
That's what I like to call it. But then number two is I think Old World, more than any other game, really pushes you to build your guys, especially looking at things like 40k and Age of Sigmar, where you maybe can paint the guys your way, but building the army your way is really truncated. Like, it's not really available. This is not the case for this game, which is its, I think, number one primary strength. You know, you can decide you're going to run all chariots in Tomb Kings. Now I'm going to do all archers. Now I'm going to do all dragons, or like big constructs. Like, and that's your thing. Oh, I like to build this special character in this special way. And sure, there are meta builds and meta picks, but even then, people tend to just really flirt around the edges with that. So I would say that having run lots of events and seen loads of people play and seeing people play regularly or irregularly is that they focus on what they want to do, and the meta be damned.
I think that I don't know how things are now in 40k and AOS, because I've been out of it for a while. The impression I have with things like 10th edition 40k is that there are sort of archetypes and there's sort of best picks, like best in slot, and it's, you know, there's not a ton of variety in the list builds. I remember I was talking with Steve at Mountain Miniatures when I was down there, and he was talking about how, like, people used to come into mini wargaming all the time to do, you know, battle reports. That's how they would film them. They, you know, you'd come down, you'd hang out at the F bunker, and then you'd shoot a battle report with them. And he said that, like, people used to bring their dudes, you know, they used to bring their, like, themed armies and narrative stuff. And he was saying that it was actually getting to be a bit of a grind because, you know, before anyone showed up, if they knew what army they, like, what faction the person coming for the visit was going to play, they could guess, you know, what was going to be in that army to a pretty close, you know, within a pretty close margin. And so I don't know what pushes that. That might be the, you know, way things are set up now in 40K. That it is a bit more gamified. And again, we've talked about this in the past, that sort of a really fuzzy distinction between sort of a game and a war game. And I think Old World still has its very much its Warhammer wargaming roots. And that's not to knock any of the other ways that you can approach playing stuff on the tabletop, but it is a different experience. And I think I think you're right. It does allow a little bit more expression in the armies you build. The issue is, and I think this was always something that I was, you know, frustrated me when I was really into 40K, and I think just as a general community issue, is that when your dudes get on the table and they do not meet your imagined expectations at all. And I'm glad to hear that people are continuing to try and make their things work and they're able to come in with reasonable expectations. But if you're just picking up Old World and you go down and you do the worst thing you could possibly do, which is like do a pickup game with a random stranger with just your dudes, and you get smoked, you know, you get absolutely lit up and it's a miserable experience, that could just be like, oh, this game's not for me. And so I think that is, you know, like, you're always going to have mismatches. You're always going to have, you know, armies that aren't built to be good at the game. They're built to meet a you know, personal aspiration or whatever. But I think the Old World's core rules could be, and we have a big opportunity looking at us here, could be fundamentally improved to widen the scope of, you know, what could work in Old World. Can we get armies that look more like those you know, big ranked up armies that are maybe more in our imaginations? And can we maybe reduce the power level a bit? I think the thing that separates, I hate the word casual, but you know, the difference between I've come to a definition on casuals in my mind, which is that they just don't want to lose badly. I think that's really what being a casual is all about. Just don't. It doesn't matter if I win or lose, but I just don't want to, like, pick everything up and have to think too hard. And I think the game's set up right now with some power mechanics that make the likelihood of someone who's just showing up with their bricks of infantry, you know, having to pick everything up.
To be clear, you're talking about in the Old World as an example.
In the Old World, yeah.
To defend, like, the 40k AOS mechanic, I actually see that as a positive, which defines it as different from something like the Old World or the Horus Heresy, which I think, is good. Like, I think there's a ton of people who would like to, and let us know in the comments if you are one of those people. There's a lot of people who really want to play the Old World, but they feel intimidated. The books are big. you know, the biggest question always, you're like, okay, I've got some night goblins. You're like, cool. You're like, how wide? And you're like, 7. And you're like,
7 sounds good.
Yeah. But why not 5? Like, what's my plan, right? Like, and there is so much variation, so much. There is so much distinction in the old world, how you build it, what you do with it. That's brilliant. I love that, just to be very, very clear, but also overwhelming. Having a game system, like a wargaming system, that's just very much like, hey, playing Space Marines is pretty much these units. And you're like, great. That's really great for that group of people as well, who really want to engage on that level, right? So I think, but this is where we get into the kind of crux of what's happening today. So with that,
I do want to say that I full-heartedly believe you can have both. I think you can have a game design that gives you the freedom to, you know, play a wide variety of units, that doesn't force things into really narrow metas, you know, that you know, doesn't set archetypes, that gives you some spice, that also, you know, feels like it plays fair. You know what I mean? So like I think you can have both, and I think honestly, like right now with the core rules of Old World, they just need they need an errata, they need an FAQ. So that's it.
Which is what we're talking about today. Yeah, I would say there's a lot of question marks around that. Like, you know, do Games Workshop have the actual like resources that they could put into making something like that happen? You know, like I always feel like but like me, you, other people maybe have always been chasing the mythological beast of a well-designed game with really good internal balance that's got good external balance. That's always been a factor. And looking at the kind of like, you know, the up and down sailboat on a rocky storm that is the mainline games, Old World at least has maintained like a consistent play state for the past 18 months. But with the new match play, so with the new match play guide though, and new missions, that's already enough to like turn the apple cart upside down potentially. But the big thing we're talking about today is that there will be an accompanying FAQ, and rumors have been flooding the internet. Flooding the internet. And I assume, first off, let's talk about when we think it'll arrive. I think it'll arrive when the match play guidebook is available to pick up in the store. So there'll be, the match play guide will go on pre-order, and then you'll be able to pick up in the store a couple of weeks later. I think it'll probably arrive then. That's when I think it'll arrive.
I mean, yeah, that feels reasonable. We have been guessing at when this will come for almost a year.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Like, so we're what? I guess about 6 months in, it was clear that the core mechanics needed this treatment, and so we've been pining. I think the first thing I look forward to was September 2024, and then like absolutely it had to be January 2024, and now it's confirmed that it's somewhere in the next quarter. You know, based on the article that was dropped on Warcom. So yeah, I think you're right though. Something like this tends to be not paired with you know, a pre-order window, but paired instead with, you know, the actual you know, getting a book in your hand. And it does seem like it would go hand in hand best with the match play guide, with the new missions and stuff. And it, you know, moves us hopefully confidently into a Old World 1.5 kind of a scenario, and 1.5s of editions are often the best forms of the edition.
Okay, well, so today we're going to talk about the top 5 things we'd probably like to see for ourselves, what we'd like to see. But yeah, like, I mean, even this is also, just before we talk about what the top 5 things we want to see, even this kind of like suspicious, is it even going to emerge, has caused ripples amongst the community, right? Like, it's been an kept secret, a much alluded to, much like discussed. It's caused behind the scenes gossip and drama all over the place. Well, how do you feel about that?
I sort of wonder how much the tail has wagged the dog, to be perfectly honest.
Interesting.
Like in the fact that like everyone is just assuming that it's got to come and something substantial has to come, and people the expectation that this will happen is out there. And again, if you ever go on to like any of their public posts, because Old World's got its own little marketing thing on Facebook, you know, every single comment is about you know, when are the legacy armies going to be made official, and when will There'd be a fix for infantry. All of these comments are just up in their face all the time, and it's a good thing. Customers demanding that the game be maintained and patched and improved where it's wanting, I think is a really good thing. So I do wonder how much because I think I kind of projected a lot of these assumptions on them that they would come back and do this. There was no guarantee that it would happen, and there's still no guarantee that what is about to be released is going to be comprehensive. There's the opportunity for a lunchbox letdown, which I hope doesn't happen. It does feel like this has been a very carefully considered, swing at it. And by all indications, it will try to fix some significant bugaboos for people who've been playing.
Yeah, so before we go into this, let us know what the top 5 changes you think you'd like to see are in the comments below. Like, what changes, what in your play group, what's been going on, because obviously they're going to differentiate very much from my play group to Val's play group to the events we see and other stuff. And also mine and Val's experience are going to change it as well. It'll be interesting. And yeah, it might not be the panacea, the silver bullet that we need to make the game. But I would say that before we go any further, you and me kind of both agree that the thing that we want to see more than anything is a wider variety of options for each army to play. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I'd love to see something, unlock what makes up the majority of probably a lot of folks' collections out there, which would probably rank and file infantry and elite infantry, and even a lot of cavalry out there isn't so great. So sort of the genuine, there was a specific unit classification of core, making it so that those aren't always feeling like such a tax unit would be really, really great. And by and large, I think they have done a really good job in the design of these rules, especially at the, for the most part, at the unit level. To me, these are core mechanics, global things that can be addressed that would really just completely change the way we might approach playing and building armies, and even that's kind of refreshing without necessarily like taking away from everything that people have built up so far. But as soon as like a rumor of like infantry might be getting some uplift went around in the TSN chat that you get to be a part of if you ever attend an event with Rob. There were just all these just out of the woodwork immediately. Everyone's showing off their bricks of infantry that they've already painted or have been painting, wishing they had something they could do with them. So I suspect people have already been, making their armies as they thought they should be. But when they're going to events, they're probably tweaking their lists and making them a little bit more efficient as it is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be interesting. Okay, so let me kick you off, or would you like to kick us off, please, with what you think the first change you'd like to see for the game is? And again, with that concept that we're trying to make it so that people can play with more stuff. That's the goal, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I think I'd probably kick it off with some tweaks to magic.
Okay.
So for me, magic actually isn't awful. I really love the way magic works in the game, in the sense that it is really knit into the fabric of a lot of these armies and how they work and how they function, how they buff themselves, all that kind of stuff. The issue is that to interact with that very important element of the game, there's really only one of the available types of casters around that's worth its being on the table usually, and that's a level 4 caster. So that pushes everyone into a list design situation, which is, well, here's my level 4. Okay, now what? And that's not every single kind of archetype, but you'll rapidly find that if you can get a level 4, just bring one, because they're the ones who are going to be able to dispel the best. They're going to be the ones who are able to cast the most effectively. And so I think really the root of that is because of the way the dice rolls work for casting and dispelling. In previous versions of Games Workshop games where they've had a mechanic like this, where it's just 2d6 to cast a spell, I don't think they had a built-in mechanic where there was a range of a +4 for the highest level caster versus only a +1. So like that means that that +4 advantage on the dice is just overwhelming. Like it's very, very difficult to overcome that. So that eliminates levels 1, 2, and often 3. That eliminates a lot of bound item options from being worthwhile. A lot of units that have sort of bound spells built into them are much less reliable. There's all these sort of knock-on effects to the having that really basically too wide of a disparity between your top level casters and your low level casters.
It also means like army books that can either take advantage of magic items that give you like access to more spells or higher casting, or army rules like in Mort Cult where you get more casting, that they really compound the issue, and there's a real have and have not situation, right?
Yes, I mean Mort Cult is a great example of it really it's a hat on a hat. So not only do you have the level 4, but now you can boost that level 4's ability to cast a spell by using one of their abilities to sacrifice wounds of a is it constructs? I think any constructs that are nearby, and you just add plus, I think up to +4. I don't know. This get pretty high. Basically, you can make it so that you're only not casting successfully if you're if you roll double ones or your opponent rolls double sixes, and that in its own right, decreases interactivity. It also forces Tomb Kings to always be probably asking themselves the question of why wouldn't I run Mortuary Cult?
Yeah.
I think essentially the way those bonuses work on the dice, I think would be a real easy place to start. One thing I should say is that, back in January, when I was particularly, for whatever reason, very frustrated that these things were not being addressed, I actually wrote out my own version of a balanced patch and annoyed all of my friends, including Rob, with all of my ideas, and eventually was talked off the ledge of ever publishing it. So I have I have my own prescriptions, but essentially I think reducing the benefit to cast of your level 4. Say you can pick a number. Maybe they max out at a +3, and then like your level 1s and 2s max out at a +2, and then also make it so that your bonuses to dispel and cast are capped in some way. I think that's important too. So that way, if you have Mortuary Cult, sure, you have a cool ability to buff up the dice, but just have a universal limit of how much you can add to your wizard level, and that just again keeps people in more of a range where they're interactive. They have a chance to stop spells. They also have a chance to get spells off with weaker wizards, and that just opens up a lot more things in the game.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid choice, because 1s and 2s really aren't really effective in the game. One of the things I wouldn't mind seeing, or maybe throwing into the mix, and not necessarily like in opposition to this, is to make casters more identifiable. Like, I really enjoy the spell laws, and I enjoy like your sig spells and like what you're able to do there. But I wouldn't mind it if casters had their own unique spell. They know a spell in addition to. It would really give you a good way to identify out each caster as something separate outside of spell laws, because oftentimes your wizard is just a wizard, and sure, there are a couple of little buffs on certain wizards that are really impactful, but I wouldn't mind if I could really change up how I play my army, because wizard A slightly different to wizard B. They're both level 2s, let's say. If we could sort out the level 4, level 2 or level 1 kind of like disparity, and then they're and I change up the function of my army. I think a lot about those 3 Empire wizards, and sure, the spells that they have access to change maybe based on who they are, but having something that's uniquely identifiably them would, I think, be really cool. There's obviously a worry that one of them is just so good that's the one you take, but I guess that's really in writing the rules better. So that's I think that would be really fun. And seeing a Treeman Ancient do a different spell to a Troll Hag. Like, you bring a Troll Hag and you gain access to spell. It feels like it really changes the narrative of how the army plays and the shape of the army, which I think would be good as well, because I do feel that that's something they've left off the table. But I agree with you 100% that the magic thing should be addressed.
Yeah, and again, this is I think with your idea there, all the pieces are in play to do just that. Like, they have all these faction signature spells. They have unique spell lores to wood elves, beastmen, and trolls. However, they make it hard to use those things. For example, a treeman ancient can only have that lore when he is taken in the not particularly awesome army of infamy for the wood elves. Because they're not allowed to take magic items, and therefore they're not allowed to take the thing that would allow them to take their special tree lore in a grand army. So there are moments where the rules do sort of trip over themselves to, again, remove the ability to do that. And it would be cool if like the faction specific signatures, maybe that's the benefit rather than getting a big casting benefit. Maybe the higher level is you're able to take more of your unique signatures. Maybe you're able to take 2 signature spells or something like that. So yeah, I think there's so much opportunity there to do things like that. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah, but I agree with you. I think definitely addressing magic would be good, and make magicians feel less like a mandatory auto include, but as part of a thematic army would make much more sense. So yeah, I agree. Outside of the numbers, I think there's also something that could be addressed as like, you just don't need the thing just because to have the thing is like complements how you're playing. Like, which would be good, and they're identifiable. It's just like, I'm a level 4, cool. I'm a level 4, okay, cool. Do you have what's your story though? Like, I need a bit more.
Well, and that's special characters too. Right now, like there was like this massive roster of special and unique characters for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and we've got half of the factions getting back 2 to 3 each faction. You know what I mean? So like, there really isn't a lot of special character flavor. Period. And so like, yeah, there's lots of room there for them to go do things. I think actually an example of exactly what you're describing was nailed. One of my favorite special characters is Lady Elise Duchard. Who has like a really harsh but cool dispel mechanic, who's only, I think she's a level 3. But like she's really awesome in a very unique way that only she does those things. And so, yeah, there's lots of room to develop stuff like that.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I'm going to piggyback off your point then and jump into one of my points, which is like not quite as meta, but just really simple. Vortexes. When you cast vortexes, being able to dispel from the vortex versus dispelling against the caster. Super simple. And if you don't know, for anyone watching, you need to be in range of the caster to stop a vortex, not in range of the vortex to stop the vortex. And again, this would also help level 1s and 2s out who have that 18-inch range versus level 4s. And that seems like just a really simple one, nice and easy. Means vortexes maybe aren't quite as punchy, or they're not quite as impactful, or
may I ask what you're driving at there? Like, what is because to me, I think the game of positioning for the caster with vortexes was actually kind of a cool wrinkle in the rules. And so, like, are you seeing something that is it just like adding that interactivity when a caster is just too good at like dropping a vortex and piecing out? Like if they have reserve move or something like that?
Yeah, reserve move is a great example, and I've seen that used a little bit too much. And also, someone myself who's used a lot of vortexes, my opponent just not being able to make it so that they can, apart from just rolling the dice, like the global, yeah. Like it doesn't just interact well. Like they're literally like 2 feet away from a pillar of fire raging in their face, and they're like,
pillar of fire.
They're like, I'm not going to bother with that. Like, I'm not going to try and do anything to stop that. It just doesn't really work in my head or on the tabletop. And I think like there are some, like the reserve move as an example, and a bunch of other like little wrinkles, which are really fun to use for sure. But I think from the other side of that, it would just be much simpler if you're just like, because I think they're too obnoxious. That's all I'm going to say. And not just pillar.
That was my follow-up. Is this a pillar of fire problem? Because I can tell you that I get so upset when I fail to dispel pillar of fire when it's cast, and then it burns me. And then I fail to dispel it when it's on the table, even with the level 4, like, because then you're eating that pillar at least 2 more times. It is an awful feeling. Is that a pillar problem, or is that a vortex problem?
No, because I think the other vortexes as well. I think like there's some those really big pie plate vortexes, like column of crystal and stuff. Like I think I think it would just be simpler, and also, yeah, I just think it would be simpler, and I think it would be more engaging. It doesn't necessarily make the game any more tactical, but that's not really my goal. My goal is the on tabletop experience for people, and I think that one is just a simple, just like I can see it, I'm going to stop it, because ultimately, and I said this, I played against Scott from a Triple Crown, and he's such a great dude, and I put a shit plastic circle from whatever cheap factory in the world that would make it, and I just put it through his Grail Knights that were beautifully painted, and then I put it back through his Grail Knights, and they were beautifully painted, and there were no Grail Knights left. And I was like, I don't I want the game. I like the spells. I like magic. I like vortexes. I like everything about it. It's really cool and thematic, and give me more. But if I had to sacrifice never being able to put a crappy plastic circle on the board for having beautifully painted Bretonnian knights running around, I would accept that. Do you know what I mean? Like that doesn't. That's not as impactful. And if it was like a cool 3D print, then and I saw it flying around, it was like a pillar of fire or like a necromantic ghost or whatever, then maybe it's a little bit cooler. But right now, I'm trading the cool for the bit of plastic. That's what I'm after.
The hottest take, a pillar of fire take. How would you, if you could, how would you change pillar of fire?
See, I would randomize. I think the simplest answer is just randomize it, right? Like just randomize the direction it goes. The issue you come up with then is that it's a really nice tech piece to give lots of armies to deal with issues like like banshees, for example, or ethereal stuff. Like it's a good tech piece to deal with stuff that's super annoying. And also really rewards good positional play and doesn't reward bad positional play. So I don't know. I mean, I like the idea that you could cast it and then both players could roll off. If there's two wizards within range of it, you could roll off to see who could control it and move it around.
That's kind of a dope idea.
Yeah,
I've never heard that idea. That's kind of dope.
Like just move it around. That's fun. Again, just measure range to the vortex, and then both casters are just like, I rolled higher, I'm going to move it this time. So then there's a risk versus reward versus it. But the simplest answer probably is just to make it random. At which point, probably no one takes it.
Probably no one takes it, and that's the thing with it. For me, I think there's two ways to fix pillar of fire. One, there's a guardrail in Magic that has existed as far as I know in everything. Like, well, at least going back a while, which is that you couldn't have duplicate spells in an army. Okay, so I will say this, that was definitely in 8th edition. I have no idea if it was anywhere else, but you could, like, once one wizard rolled up a spell, it wasn't able to be had by another wizard in your army. There were some ways to sneak duplicates of spells, whether they were bound to something or whatever. But in general, it was very hard to spam a particular spell. It was just difficult to do in the game, and it was more easily controlled so that when there were powerful spells, looking at you, Purple Sun, and all these massive ones, they were at least confined to specific casters most of the time. So I think that's an easy one. And another easy or even an easy one would be, because there's a lot of remains in play spells, which vortices are one of them, simply make it so that once there is an instance of a vortice on the table, casting another one in your army dispels the other one. Like they have that mechanic for hexes, where like if you cast a particular hex on a unit, suddenly all the other ones are dispelled that were already on there. And that's to, try and make stacking more difficult or what have you. Or not making so you can't combo with others. So like they have those guide rails elsewhere, but I think if it was like, if you made it so that, Pillar of Fire was rarer, that would be good. And then I think the way to not take it out of the game and still make it cool is reduce the strength on it. Maybe they wouldn't want to do that because it's a Pillar of Fire, and like having it be like a strength 2 might be, not as like not in their sort of guidelines for what a fire ability needs to be. But like I think if you lowered the strength, suddenly it's wounding toughness 4 on 6s, which is not nearly as bad, and it's really wounding toughness 3 on 5s. I think a strength of 2 would go a long way to reducing its effectiveness without removing it from the game.
Yeah, another good option obviously would be to make each casting, a general rule of thumb is each casting after the first time you cast a spell. So let's say I do Fireball from one wizard, because we can go outside of Vortexes now. Like I cast Fireball from wizard, it costs an 8 or a 9, whichever. And then the next time I cast it, it costs +1. Like, and every time I want to cast the same spell another time, it's going to cost me an additional +1, which also is good for me as a player playing well. I can use my timing as well. I'm like, well, this wizard gets +1 to cast, so I'll do that second. There's a lot happening there, but that's a good way, instead of just saying no, you can't cast the same spell more than once. Maybe there's some sort of like difficulty to doing so, and it becomes more difficult.
That's like, that feels like it was a mechanic somewhere. I seem to remember escalating costs on something. I don't know if I'm hallucinating that, but anyway.
Is that Croak spell
Let us know in the
from
comment.
8th edition?
Pardon?
Croak spell from 8th edition, I think.
Oh, did it go? Yes, you're right. It went up in difficulty as he casted it. God bless.
R.I.P. the frog. Love him.
R.I.P. the frog. Where is he? He's always right here with me.
Yeah, I love that frog.
He's never far. He's right here.
Unfortunately, I had to buy 2 croaks, because the first croak, my dog ate the frog out of the chair. Just out of the chair. I was
that
like,
was a big dog. Impressive.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, he was a Newfoundland. That was a whole. It could have just done the whole thing, not even touched the sides. Okay, so moving on from Magic, what would you say the next piece is? So yeah, on from Magic. What's your next kind of hot take? Pillar of Fire.
We've made that joke twice now. Damn it! All right, my next, probably not too hot a take, but. I think it's time, well past the time. This is probably the most incomplete part of the rule set, in the sense that there are a lot of questions that cannot be answered by reading the books, and that is the entire class of unusual formation known as Skirmishers.
Skirmishers.
World Skirmishers.
So I guess a great question to kind of ask. I say to myself before I ask it, is, God damn it, is to you. When we talked about Wood Elves, I was actually quite happy when we brought up the conversation of like, does it even need to work this way? Can you revisit that concept? So like Skirmishers as an idea are attempting to like very much replicate a real world idea of what like a skirmishing unit would do, right? Like the formation, how it's shaped. How do you, and you see that obviously with lance formation and open and close order. First question I'm going to ask you truthfully is, do you genuinely believe, and also everyone watching, do you genuinely believe we need that as a thing?
So the Skirmishers, I think, go directly to the like historical wargaming roots of Warhammer Fantasy.
Yes.
Right? So it's a unit class, that is common. They were harassing units, and they were, common to all of the rosters of various historical armies. So as part of a rank and flank game, having the Skirmisher unit class like unit type, I think is important. What I think got lost in the sauce here was that Skirmishers traditionally, so there's a couple of different ways Skirmishers have actually been done on the table, but if you look at the games that I've looked at that are like they are now, where they're sort of we'll say 40k style or AOS style, where they're in unit coherency, they're not in any sort of a ranked up formation. The ability to skirmish was incredibly limited. So the ability to skirmish was limited to the types of units that you would have seen in sort of historical scenarios, and that was essentially just very light infantry with maybe some short range weapons, not necessarily heavily armored, and couldn't fly. So like they were very limited as to who was able to skirmish. And when you get to 8th edition, they have things like fast cavalry. We have light cav rules in Old World, but fast cav kind of gave you the vibes of a skirmishing cavalry formation, but still was restricted to being ranked up. So I think for whatever reason, it really does feel like they had skirmishers designed one way, and I think that was probably the 8th edition way, which is pretty abstracted. In 8th edition, all a skirmisher unit looked like on the table was, they were still ranked up, but they were slightly spaced out. I think they had to be half an inch apart, right? And that just solved a lot of the problems. They didn't block line of sight to themselves. They could kind of freewheel, if I recall correctly, but they were much easier to manage and integrate into other parts of the game, like when they interact with when they interact with ranked up non-skirmishing units. And then even when you look back to like 6th and I believe 7th as well, which I've had a look at, I think they solved a lot of the problems by just restricting who was able to skirmish and by making it so that it wasn't a common thing. There was particular unit types that were allowed to skirmish, and that was it. And it wasn't a very common rule at all. That was filled by other things, especially when you have sitting right there, like open order. If you want a slightly more maneuverable version of a rank and file unit, just make them open order, rather than making them the skirmishers. So that's the first thing that I would say is that you just remove skirmisher, replace it with open order on a ton of units. You're going to solve a lot of problems right there. And then they need to really they can just go back to some older editions and finish writing, the rules for how these interact with rank and flank units in the game. And then it's a fine unit type. But it just literally it was not finished. It was not completed. The thought was not finished in this case.
And as you saw from like we saw from the FAQ in January, right? Or was it the one before? But either way, there was some attempt to do something a little bit with it. But again, it didn't complete the whole way. I wouldn't want to see the skirmish role go from the game. I'm really about unit roles and like that breadth of like choice inside of the game. Maybe it's because also we've seen certain types of units like heavy cav and infantry not really play as much of a role. It's felt like very much like, okay, cool, I've got a monster, or I'm just going to see swarms of skirmishers because they're so effective. And, and it makes sense that you wouldn't have ranked up Pegasus Knights. It would be silly, or at least both thematically and also on the tabletop, it wouldn't really make a lot of sense. But also, I would like them to revisit this and give very solid answers, very solid, very direct, very comprehensive. One of my points later is going to be about comprehensive, because I think they're right. The rule set in many places is we're going to do, and this is not for a competitive. Just to be clear, it's not for a competitive.
Just people playing the game.
Just for people playing the game. I would love a point I'm going to make later is going to be about a flow chart. I would love a flow chart where it's just and at this point X. And at this point, Y. And I'm cool, please do that. That would be really good. And it'd be really useful for people to just be able to bust it open and even just follow that diagram down the line to be able to do stuff. Because providing a resource for your players, it's all well and good writing a rule, but I find it really odd that then they seems very resistant to being oh, bud, is that confusing? No problem. I'm going to write that down in a flowchart for you. And then I'll just get someone to knock it up as a design and post it. I got you. That should be the bare bones of what they want to do. Do you know what I mean? They should just be whoa, is that? Oh, I got you. Don't worry.
Yeah, this was a game that I genuinely feel was published by surprise. This was probably something that they were it feels like a game that they had expectations of it being, sent to the printers at some distant point in the future, and then suddenly that distant point in the future was next week. That's the way it feels. Especially around and I think that really shows itself around skirmishers. Other stuff, I gotta say, I say this a lot. We've had how many? We've had nine armies of infamy, introducing new items, new mechanics, all kinds of stuff into the game. Very few breakdowns. Very few ambiguities. Period.
Yeah.
The two massive books that have all of the rules for the armies. It's not like it's not like they don't make logical sense. We wish they did. Some units were better or whatever, or made toned down or what have you, but they work. Mechanically, it works. It's sound. But for whatever reason, in this particular instance, in the core rules, when they went to, because it is the Old World is very much a pastiche of essentially 7th edition fantasy and Warhammer Ancient Battle 2nd edition. That's what I believe, and I think that's it. They missed, I think, a lot of the nuance when they sort of merged some of those ideas together, and one of them was certainly on skirmishers. So yeah. I don't think they need to remove it. I think they just need to return it to its roots and give skirmishers the right role, because there's stuff like chariot runners that they brought in from Warhammer Ancient Battle 2nd edition and previous ones which is really cool. The idea of like these guys screening your units for you. The idea that if a skirmisher, flees from a charge through a ranked unit, it doesn't cause it to break. There are all these really neat things that skirmishers could do that really they're not being used for right now. And then it's not like that it's game breaking. It's like this is just the definition of literally broken. Like it is hard unless you're willing to sort of do what you think works best with your opponent, which is, by the way, how we all play. You spend a lot, or how you or you spend a lot of time working with folks to make an FAQ to try and fill in these blanks. I really hope that skirmishers are not an FAQ. I hope that this is actually just like a delete these pages from the rulebook. Here's 4 pages on how skirmishers actually work, are bad, go nuts. That's what I'm hoping for.
I'd love that. Okay, cool. So after skirmishers, I'm really proud of us. This late into the video, we haven't talked about dragons. We haven't talked about ranks of infantry yet. We are going to get there. Don't worry. But there are some final wrinkles in the game. And one of the ones, because Val asked me, Rob, you run a lot of events, and I run a lot of events, and I have a consistent single question I get asked a lot, which is when a unit becomes a unit during the combat phase. And my best example that I've been able to, or the best kind of way I've been able to describe this is I often get called to a table and 2 people kind of look at the table like they've spilled a drink. They just go like, right. They go, oh, this happened. And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? And what I'm really talking about is multi-combats. When multi-combats happen, you end up in so many janky positions. You also bring in the 1-inch rule, which is also, like, I personally think a fundamental rule, but like that's a me thing, not necessarily a game thing. But what happens sometimes in a combat is units, especially units with characters in, the whole unit dies. And then you end up in this really interesting position, which Val definitely has answered in the square-based FAQ about when a unit becomes a unit. But it's something I would really like the designers to answer, because it brings up...
And you're talking about specifically, like just so we're clear on the scenario here, like the situation might be there's a unit with a character or maybe multiple characters in it.
Correct. Multiple characters.
All the rank and flank get wiped out. Let's say the flanking unit is now nowhere near those characters because they're in the middle of that front rank. So they're not engaged by the looks of things at that exact moment. And the unit that the characters were a part of no longer exists. Are they allowed to smooch up? Are they allowed to scoochy?
Yeah, because at that point,
join that fight.
Yeah, which is a rule that you do. You move units closer together, but like when that unit's been wiped out, is the 2 remaining characters or a single remaining character actually a unit now or later? Another question.
And are they the unit that flanking unit was originally engaged with, or
exactly.
Are they a new unit that they weren't ever engaged with?
Or is it 2 individual new units, so that like the unit that scooches up is now engaged in the flank of 1, so he takes a break test as an additional +1, or is not? And I know a lot of people are going to be like, I think the dragon thing's more of a problem, Rob, or the multi-saves. And I agree with you. I really do understand that, but this really feels like my trench in World War I is wetter than your trench. Like, I'm like, this is my personal problem, and I would like it to be resolved. And I think there's a real easy answer, which you covered in FAQ, and I think that there's maybe like a more detailed answer potentially, but I would really like the flow chart again, that combat scenario. I feel like they could really do with just having models charge into each other and ask themselves what happens then. That's what they could really do with.
With regards to square-based FAQ, you keep saying that I wrote it. I just have to say immediately, I did not write it. I've been heavily involved in influencing it, but like all things, I've leaned on your input, countless others, including the folks who run a lot of the frontline gaming events. And anyway, it is a big effort. Not just me. Really need to say that explicitly.
Yeah, I just don't even remember.
Know that if you just went.
Yeah, I just don't even remember if I might have answered it.
Absolutely. It could have been. This could have already been like, this comes up all the time. This needs to be in here. So like, it's ephemeral and not correctly attributed if you were ever to go look at it. Regardless, I think the thing you keep coming back to is this idea of a flowchart. right? Like this idea of like logical laying out of the way these interactions happen, and where those things might branch off. And I think what we're seeing actually is that that's not how the design is done in the first place.
Correct.
So I think the design style here again was taking a lot of elements from different versions of the game, a couple specific versions of the game, and that's fine. But putting them together without necessarily having the time to go through and say, okay, so how does this all work now that we put them all together? And I think in doing a flowchart of like how combat is resolved and like potential scenarios there, a game designer might discover, wow, that's needlessly complicated, and that would be a way to solve and remove needless complication from the game. And I think this might be your particular bugaboo. I feel like this to me feels like you said, like this isn't my far wetter trench is what you do in Follow Up and Pursuit, and how things resolve from a multi-combat when everyone's running away or some are staying, etc.
Yeah,
I gotta get the book out for that every time, and that one needs a flowchart for me.
Yeah, normally, because what happens is I'm also then called over often for then also the Follow Up and Pursue, but at this point they're like, who's a unit? And I'm like, cool, which is like, so I agree with you. I'm also bothered by the Follow Up and Pursue, right? I'll join you in your trench after. But before I get there, I'm like, okay, all right, so who's a unit first? And then we'll do everything else after, right? Also, because then it becomes really fun about like, center to centers, if they're different units at different points. Because actually, you and me have just spent a little bit of time actually talking about this before we were recorded. And actually, at what point in the flowchart you decide that the new units become new units actually changes other factors in what happens in Follow Up and Pursue.
Let's throw skirmishers right back in there. When do skirmishers become skirmishers again?
Yeah.
And when can they spread out? Are they just in a ranked up brick? Like they had a FAQ answer that added only mud to this one. So like we're talking here about really the crux of Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah,
we're talking about how combats are fought, how combats are won, and how they're resolved when they're lost. And it is a really not very nicely put together bit of a mess. And it's a beautiful mess. It's a beautiful mess, but it doesn't need to be this hard. Doesn't need to be this hard.
Yeah,
so
I would like to be clear to everyone, especially if you aren't playing a lot or you're planning on playing. Most people vibe it out. Like I've never had anyone 100%. I've never, and this is at a tournament, right? Like, or an event.
Yes.
So this is like, I guess if the most stakes are on the line, not really, but so it's a chill thing. I'm just saying, like, the fact that you need someone like me to come over and start to make a couple of decisions just so at least people feel it's fair. I'm just like, come on, make it so that people can just play that game themselves. Because if they didn't have someone 100%. Like me, they would have to be like, when do we decide? Which is a bit of a shame.
And as gamers, we tend to be like, oh, that's cool. Let's look it up. So let's look at it as just a regular player experience. And I'm sure even the most casual folks will spend a minute or two looking up a rule before they're like, meh, whatever. Let's just do it this way. Like there's always that it's just sort of an unnecessary step that sometimes is fun. I'm not going to lie. I've enjoyed having to go on these, solve these riddles and these puzzles. It's actually something I kind of missed from previous versions of Warhammer, but not, I think really decisively core elements of the game, like the core rules should be a little more straightforward, I think, and they could either be streamlined or written so that they're very succinct and clear. And I think that's well within the abilities of these rules writers. And if it's not written that way, I think, again, it's largely because they were told to publish what they had, and this is what we got. So that's it.
So to go from something really, really silly, what would be your next point?
What would be my next point? I think I've got to go with threat ranges. I got to go with long bomb charging, threat ranges.
I think this is a bigger deal than triple save characters, in my opinion.
I would maybe agree. I would maybe agree. Because there's always going to be fast stuff, right? Like there's always going to be things that are relatively faster than others.
Can I put a question mark on that for a moment, if you don't mind?
Yep.
there's always going to be fast stuff is very much like there'll always be pain and suffering, right? Like, not that that's what you're saying. What I mean is
Yes.
like there being fast stuff should be intentional, is my point. It's like saying there'll always be cannons. Cool, they should be, right? Like, factions have cannons, but like the intent of it being fast should be like, it shouldn't just be like, well, they're fast.
Yeah.
Like, there should be some intent behind it, which I think is what we're going to talk about.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that I sometimes think, yeah, cool, like there will be fast stuff, but it should be intentionally fast versus just accidentally fast.
Or like all-encompassingly fast.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of fly, there's a lot of Swiftstride with fly. And so for those of you out there who maybe are not as mechanically minded, essentially you have a class of units. Sometimes they're flying, dragons. Sometimes they're, Pegasus, whatever it might be, that might have a movement value of 9 or 10. So that's their base move that they're allowed to use, and then they are able to add the 2d6 that they roll on the dice, the highest of those two, so that up to a maximum of 6. We're at 16, and then they're allowed to declare a charge 3 inches further than that if they have Swiftstride, which is bringing us to a 19-inch declarable charge. But they're really able to charge something that's up to 22 inches away. So like the average on that means that on average they're succeeding at a charge at something like 17 inches, which is right around their maximum charge range. It's very hard to fail the charge. And so for me, the thing that is lost in these rules is the downside of going super fast, right? And so like there is no so one, the general threat range is way too far. Because even if you have to move, like say you somehow manage to honk the charge and you wind up short of the unit, you're probably still out of charge range of the infantry or whatever the thing is that you were charging, because you're so far away to start with.
We should bring up the fact that an infantry charge range is movement, often 4, plus 1d6 of the 2d6 that you roll, which means your average charge range is about 7, with declarable being 10. Like, also the units that have the kind of fly and swift stride oftentimes don't have to account for any kind of wheeling on charges. Normally it's a monster, so the actual width is very small, so they've got like, they don't have to move like or give up a lot of movement in a wheel when they move, or they're skirmishers, in which case it doesn't matter at all.
Or beeline,
or they're a lone character. So actually, you can be. There was a situation I was in the other day, because when we talk about infantry, I want to talk about having a free wheel. There's a situation the other day when I could have flank charged like a 2 monsters fight, well, a monster fight in my monster, and I was literally inches away. But because I would have had to wheel this much, like I just couldn't. And I'm like, I barely can charge with this unit anyway. And now I'm in a situation where I'm as close as I can basically be, but I still can't charge. It is ludicrous. Like, I really think it's ludicrous. Yeah, it's really silly. And it creates the biggest disparity in the game, in my opinion.
It does. And basically what is kind of the unfulfilled promise, I think, is like the charge mechanic that they have is I think, awesome. All right, fundamentally awesome. Okay, so like one of the things that people hated about 8th edition was that they went to a 2d6 plus your movement charge mechanic, which generally speaking meant that infantry had a threat range about as long as cavalry. It robbed cavalry of its special thing. And infantry had a lot of benefits beyond that. But infantry could make these like, massive long bomb charges. By going to the 2d6, pick the highest plus your movement, that to me actually opened up a lot of space on the board. Now threat ranges are a little more reliable because of 2d6, pick the highest. So like, better how far you're going to charge. However, you couldn't go as far. So there's more room to maneuver. That was my initial thought. The issue is with Swiftstride and Fly, especially when they're combined, those units are able to pick their fights however they like, stay out of danger for the most part themselves, unless they're confronted by a unit with similar range and deadliness. And so it just sort of makes it so one player is the victim and unable to maneuver because of the disparity in those threat ranges. I think, and this would need to be played out, But I think as a start to how to fix this is first you're not allowed to combine fly and swift stride. Swift striding's for running on the ground. You can speed it up on the ground, make potentially a a charge that way, or you can use your fly move, and that's your move. I think making it so those two things don't stack on one another, I think would be really, really helpful, and also give the player a choice, a strategic choice. Secondly, I think that if you do use Swift Stride or Fly, you should be forced to move significantly further if you do fail the charge. So that way you are able, to have a downside there. So first you got to make it so that it's possible for these units to fail charges, period. Right now it's basically unlikely that it happens. Two, I think you need to make it when they do fail a charge, they are in a vulnerable position. So one thing I think that we can agree on about something moving super fast is it's hard for them to slow down. It's hard for them to stop. So like winding up in a precarious position, let's say they have to, no matter what, move their full distance. If you Swift Stride, you got to move the full distance that you roll on the dice. Your Swift Stride, your charge roll, and your movement. You make that full charge move like you would as a pursuer, for example. That I think would help, because then when there are failed charges, now you're vulnerable. So when you're making the decision, do I take this long bomb charge? Do I take this risk? You're doing it knowing that if you don't hit the charge, which is now more difficult to make, you could wind up in a place where you're getting hit instead of doing the hitting. And that I think would open up a lot of opportunities in the game for maneuver and positioning. And that's what we want.
Yeah, I would probably take Swift Stride off almost everything. Like no monsters would ever have it, unless it was something like a Praeton or something that's like intentionally like fragile.
Ironically does not have Swift Stride.
Yeah, ironically does not have it, exactly. Like, so yeah, I would have it be something like light, fast, intentionally fast. Like, I think it's hilarious that units that have this special ability lumbering also have Swift Stride. Like a lumbering fast thing is very funny.
Yeah, Behemoth always has lumbering, but they're also Swift Stride. Yeah,
I'm like, yeah, and so I would take it off pretty much everything. I would probably only give it to light cav. And what I mean by that is, like, I wouldn't consider Grail Knights to be light cav. I would be talking about like very unarmored cavalry to be really, really fast. And then I would maybe give it out in occasional separate little places to be fun. I would not be putting it like blanket like cavalry Swift Stride. I think that seems really silly. And then even then I would want like more given to infantry. I'd like wheels to be free. Like, and yes, I do not like, obviously.
I think that should be universal. That's a quality of life thing. Who cares?
Yeah, agreed 100%. I'm sure there's someone out there like, what if something's 70 models wide? I'm like, cool. Like, just, put a cap on how wide it can be.
Closest. Sorry. So you do closest corner of the target unit from the farthest edge of the charging unit. Boom. There you go.
Yeah.
If you're a foot wide, you just made your charge really friggin' long.
Yeah, exactly. But like,
so like they're just, that's a quality of life thing for me.
Yeah. So I like what you said about the trapping, like, but even then I'm thinking about it and I'm like, well, if I've got fly 9, I can still declare a charge that's going to happen outside of an infantry unit. And sure, there should be some advantages for going fast, but oftentimes your advantage for going fast is going fast. It shouldn't be going fast and also always getting combat first. Especially maybe we've compounded the problem of these threat ranges being much longer by initiative obviously increasing as well, like, and then also there being no step up. So it's like a compounding series of things where you're always going to charge me first, you're always going to hit me first, I'm never going to get to swing back. Why do I have this unit on the board? Is a great question. And I think that as soon as someone asks themselves, why do I even play this unit? I feel like we should look at the thing that's stopping them from being able to do that. So I think I like what you said about the trapping thing. I think that's a really cool idea, but I think it still doesn't necessarily go far enough. I would strip it from everybody and then I would give more bonuses out.
There's a no-brainer fix as well, which is you drop it from a D6 roll to a D3 roll. So that way you're not able to charge. You're basically not getting a potential 3 inches past your maximum charge range. Your maximum charge range is +3, and you get D3 on the dice rather than D6. That also reduces its impact. I think you get a lot of mileage out of just making it so that these things don't stack together, which they FAQ'd to say that explicitly it does, which is too bad. But yeah, I think you just make it so these things don't stack together, and then yeah, you could look at reducing its prevalence. I think that's not an unfair statement at all.
I just playing on the tabletop like a lot, and then seeing these games and just being like, cool, I will never charge you. Like, and yeah, I guess fair, but not fair, but also with overruns and the speed of them. Like, it's just a situation where there's no opportunity for me to screen, no real opportunity for me to redirect. Like, your hands are tied, and at which point you're like, cool, you're just going to bully the board. So at that point, I would just take them away from everyone. I would even prefer everyone just rolls 2d6 end convo. I would even prefer that. Like, and sure, that doesn't make sense thematically, but at least it feels like on the tabletop, I'm not bullying or they're not bullying me just because like the math says never. Like, and it's one of the things I really like about Age of Sigmar, which I'm sure I'm going to get flamed for in the comments. But ultimately, there's never a situation in Age of Sigmar where I can't just get a double turn and get you. Like, I hate the concept of being kited, which is a term from, I think maybe it goes beyond MMORPGs, but like, it's the idea that I could just constantly be out of your range and you can never get me. And I'm like, well, that's such a boring thing to happen, right?
Yeah. So like whether it's by removing it from a lot of units, like we talked about with Skirmishers, that was a guardrail that was on there, or whether it's by removing how effective these rules are. I think either one, all of those things are effective solutions to making the game, again, that basically makes the table larger, opens up more opportunity for engagement, maneuver, risk. There's no risk. That's, I think, probably the most criminal thing about the way things are right now is that there's just no risk in charging with your dragon, because he's probably going to get there when you want him to get there. He's going to pick his fights however he wants. And then if he does somehow manage to fail, he's still safe wherever he winds up. And I think this relates to me to the same problem that Magic has, which is that the rules are cool. They if you were to look at them just at a glance, you think, oh, that's kind of neat. But then when you compound them all and when you stack them and you actually play them out, they are very meta defining, right? So like right now, a flying Swiftstride monster with a big juicy character on top, that is, if you have the opportunity to take it, if you're looking to play the best army you can, often one of the best choices you can make. And that's where you're removing choice from, and creativity from list building when you have, mechanics that compound like this to make a game state that is very polarizing. And so I think there's lots of ways you can nerf basically threat ranges to make it more interesting, more dangerous, more skillful to get into combat rather than automatic.
Yeah, absolutely. Threat ranges, I agree with you 100%. Let's address it. Let's have a look at it. And then free wheels, universal. That's great. That's also my point. Like, I also was going to do threat ranges as one of my points. So that's good. The next one, I've got a fan favorite. I'm going to just get the crowd on my side. I'm going to hit up, bring back all the Renegade armies. Easy.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
Easy points for Rob. In the FAQ, they're all legal again.
They're all allowed in tournaments. Here's something. Do we see, because we have already seen a quiet shadow update to the legacy factions, which are supposed to be untouched and dying on the vine that they were left on, aside from our beloved Renegades legacy pack. Which you can find at squarebase.com. Do we think that if there are substantial changes to the game and FAQs that change the game, do we think we might see another shadow update to the legacy factions?
A shadow update? Ooh, great question. I think probably.
Okay,
see that.
Probably.
Yeah, I think the corporate messaging that we will not touch them, don't support them, is very different to the on the ground human beings that want to create this art. The people that made the rules do not want these to have not been like something that was in the game. They'll be frustrated and annoyed as much as anybody, you know, by this decision. And it was a bean counter that made the call, not them. They wrote the rules, you know, that's their hard work and graft. And I'm sure in some cases, maybe the factions and armies that they actually loved. So like, you know, I'm sure they will like slip one in. Also, SDS is very different.
A Vampire Counts fan out there somewhere.
Yeah, it's just, I think they're just going to slip one in and have some fun. They'll just be like, there you go, a little update. Off you go.
That'd be cool.
But
so
also,
be refreshing those legacy lists on game day. Let's see
also, they might be like, shh. They like updated shh. Like the whole community, keep your mouth shut. It's very fun. All right, so we both got a point actually, because we talked about this beforehand, which kind of they go hand in hand. So we could talk about both of them. So it's mounted characters and it's also infantry, which is the number 1 point probably, you know, but
let's hit mounted characters first.
Okay,
I think they deserve their own spot. I don't know how long we've been going, but like I think they deserve their own spot. What are your thoughts on mounted characters?
So I know a lot of people consider the triple save thing to be like the egregious element of it, right? Which I don't disagree with. I don't disagree with at all. And sure, let's address triple saves. It seems a little silly. Let's have an armor save, let's have a ward save, and let's all go home, right? Whatever way we want to do it. But we also have invented regen just because, I don't know, just because.
Regen was a thing, but it was an or. It wasn't an and. And that's the weirdness of Old World.
Yeah.
So yeah. Regen on top of that was default 4-up. So regen was a default 4-up save in 8th edition. And then it could be removed by flaming attack, so it had counterplay, and you could use it instead of your ward save rather than with your ward save. So yeah, like it's an unusual restriction that they lifted. I don't get.
Yeah, and also they took away like the kind of give and take of I've got flaming weapons. Okay, dwarfs have got the ward save against flaming weapons, or like some elven stuff. Okay, cool. Like there's the odd meta like shift that they decided to move around. I agree with you 100%. So yeah, I recognize that that's a problem. Absolutely, but I feel for me the real problem is just how impactful they are in their output. Threat ranges is also like a key element of these things. These mounted characters are incredibly fast and they dictate the battle. And yes, their survivability is an issue, but it's the fact that they can just rinse combat res to the high heavens that they just win. And sure, you can build your 800 point block that just has static combat res 7, so I win that, and I'll challenge it out. And I also find the challenging thing frustrating. I find if I'm taking a dragon and I charge it in, and then a goblin champion, I'll fire, yeah, and I'm like, no, yeah, you're not allowed to say no. I'm like, no, fuck you. I'm going to just stab the rest of your mates. I'm on a dragon. It's weird. And I feel like they've been done horribly. And I would even 0.7 way down the line. I'd say challenges are a bit silly as well. I love them. And I love what they've done in the new Horus Heresy. It was a whole mini game. But
yes, that's maybe a bit far, but that's a whole show.
That's a whole show. That's great. We should compare them. Yeah. That's great.
Yes. What does Horus Heresy tell us about the future of the old world is a show. To like the mounted characters thing, again, for context, previously, the mount and the rider were separate. So like your dragon was basically a separate entity to the person riding it. And when you shot at it, you either randomly allocated between the two. In 8th edition, if you hit it with a template, both were hit, which is why cannons basically made dragons, mounted characters on dragons extinct. Because if it was hit by a cannon, it hit both the rider and the dragon, and they both died immediately. So there's that element. And when they combined them into a joint profile, they created a lot of problems around how joint profiles work. But they've actually answered most of those questions, so I think we're good there. That's working.
I prefer the joint profile. Now you have.
Pardon?
I prefer the joint profile.
I like the joint profile, kind of. I think there's probably ways you could do it. Like, for example, the initial wounds all come from the dragon, and then after that, the dude's on foot, and he's toughness, whatever he normally would be. Something like that could work really well. As long as the dragon's alive, you got to use the dragon's armor save and stuff like that. That could work really well. So you got to work your way through the mount first before you can get to the juicy character inside. That might work well. But the fact is, the issue I think with mounted characters, whether they're on a chariot, which because of weirdness in the rules is this odd thing that's invulnerable to Monster Slayer and Killing Blow, so like they can't be insta-gibbed unlike some other things. So that has benefits. But whether you're on a chariot or if you're on a behemoth or even some of the quicker monstrous mounts, you are usually getting a benefit to your toughness. You're getting a massive increase in your wounds for a relatively cheap price, and you're adding the resiliency of the character's items to the mount. So you're giving it a ward save, you're giving it, a number of different buffs. It's just essentially a Death Star is what it is. You're layering rules on top of rules on top of rules to get a very much more efficient model for the points. And I think there's, like, I've rattled off a few options, but there's lots of ways to reduce that because they are ultimately, because they're usually fast, they're non-interactive, they're going to get in there first, they're going to kill a bunch of stuff. And then even if you do get to swing at them, they are incredibly tough. Just their baseline toughness. We're talking usually toughness 6, toughness 5 if it's a chariot or a monstrous creature. So like, yeah, they're overcooked again. Like they're polarizing because they were given too many things without, I think, enough thought about what was going to happen. And the stuff that I think they assumed would work against them, for example, they've offered, and I mean, I don't want to beat up on the poor guy. He's been raked over his comments, but nonetheless, it gave insight to how they viewed this. He was like, oh, well, cannons will take care of it, or unbreakable infantry will take care of it. Neither of which are reasonable solutions unless it's all you bring, and then you don't really have an army against it, right? Ultimately, like the way the meta has adapted to these types of units, these big super characters, is by building really resilient, high static combat res, like, invulnerable units, whether it's dwarfs or undead, like these monster units that are just not tasty treats for these things. And so you get, again, a polarized game state, and that's not what we want. And there's just 1,000 things you could do to reduce it without removing, which is what we had in 8th edition, without removing that unit from the game.
Yeah, so this is a great kind of, like, especially Horus Heresy is a good example. In Horus Heresy, I play 2,000 points, you play 3,000 points, 3,000 points, and you're like, I'm gonna take a Primarch, and I'm like, whoa boy, that should kill all of my guys. And, right. So like I go, well, I'll take a Primarch, and then it just and in Age of Sigmar as an example, there are literal gods on the table. Right. Sure. And I've often said for Age of Sigmar that they should never be a god. They should be like a facet of a god, like god to
an avatar.
Like an avatar. Yeah. Like they turn their focus onto a small battle for a small amount of time.
Sure. Yes.
Because like in I think in the Heresy again, like a Warlord Titan is like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 points. It's something not playable in a normal game because it's recognized that it's not something that functions, right? And in this, like, I don't know if a dragon functions. I don't know if the stat line needs to change or if the points simply just need to go up. I don't know if it's just a situation where it's like, listen, I want to take a dragon. I'm like, dude, dragons are cool as shit, but that's a 3 or 4,000 point game because like they're cool as shit. They're world ending. They're these apocalyptic monsters. And I think also if you were to just recognize that maybe they should cost a lot more points and have maybe the same impact, but just cost more points, you then can really you stratify out the tiers at which monsters can operate. Obviously a Chaos Dragon is probably the fanciest one we could ever find, with a Cathay Dragon coming soon. So we'll find out. But and then you're like, okay, Galrock. So what's Galrock? Is Galrock a better dragon? Like you get some real stratification on where you can points cost these things. And then you can be like, for some reason, an Ragnarok at 300 points. And then you can keep going down.
Pushing 400 if I remember, but
Yeah, for some reason. And then you can work down and that gives you, and I think that actually works because I think they do try to crunch too big a thing into too small a space. I really do think that.
So I think the real issue is that the dragon isn't the problem. The character isn't the problem. It's the dragon being ridden by the character sharing everything together is the problem. Because those two things it's not a simple sum of their points value. they are amplifying each other's, benefits and abilities, right? So like it's yeah, like I think you just do the rules better so that they're just more, vulnerable, and they have some downsides. I think pointing them would simply be like, the pillar of fire becoming random would just remove it from the game. Like, so, and that, like, you can just point them to a point, and this is how they dealt with, by the way, these massive, more narrative like tier things in other games, is they just point them out of the game. In 40K, all of those things are basically out of the game because they're just beyond the scale of what a heads up game really encompasses. And yeah, I think, yeah, how much should a Chaos Lord on Dragon actually cost for what it's able to do, right? Like, that is, I don't know, like 2 or 3 times as much.
In the comments, let us know. Like, yeah,
right?
Because the point
they can solo 2,000 points of an opponent's army, no trouble.
Yeah, no trouble. Given enough time, for sure, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, and I agree with you. And it's that same sort of like comedic response when it was like, we'll just take more cannons. And it's like, okay, well, statistically, we need this many cannons to deal with it in a turn.
Right.
You would probably half it, right? You would say, how many cannons to definitely kill it in a turn? This many points. Okay, cool. Half that number so that the dragon gets 1 turn of being half killed and 1 turn of charging in and running around. And that's probably about the number it should cost, whatever that number is. And I think it's quite a lot of points.
Yeah, fair.
You know what I mean? I think that's quite a lot. And I think that's the major issue, is that while dragons are cool as hell, you're trying to put gods in a game of mortals. And I think that maybe is where we're really truncating some of the rules. And you do get that in the other game systems as well. So it's not a uniquely old world problem, because we want the cool stuff.
You want cool, powerful shit, man. Like, and I think the types of dragons that you see being ridden are not necessarily the god tier. Like, we think of Game of Thrones, like that Game of Thrones, like, a dragon is the equivalent of an F-35 fighter showing up to Agent Court, right? Like, it is an unparalleled super weapon. And that's kind of how dragons are set up right now in this game. Do they have a place at the general scale of game being played, which is 2,000 points? You might have a point, or we reframe what this tier of dragon actually is capable of and how vulnerable it is. It's like back in the day in 8th edition, and I wasn't playing, I was only a couple years ago for me, but for 8th edition, to me, it was kind of absurd that the most powerful thing that could possibly be contemplated as far as what the kind of damage it could do was a friggin' cannonball. In a world of magic and shooting lightning bolts and all that kind of stuff, like, a cannonball is the most powerful thing. And it was just like, guys, like, does a cannon really need to be strength 8, -6 AP, D6 wounds? In a game where, like, most things have 4 or 5 wounds max, like, does it need to be that strong? Maybe we could just, like, reframe what we think a cannon can do. And I think you can reframe how powerful a mounted character is without throwing away how cool it is to be able to have these monsters in the game and build armies around them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
And I think is the intent. I think I think the writers like those monsters and they miss them, and then they just cook them a bit too much, and we just need to bring them back. And I think it can be done.
Yeah, I think the other side of that, though, is the feeling that you get when you do have, like, it doesn't have to be just a dragon, but like a mounted cool monster, and then just, like, just 20 goblins with bows murder it. You're like, okay, I need something, like, because now it's not really given, it's got that ludo narrative dissonance that I'm not enjoying, right? So it's a real tough line to draw for sure, but their impact is obviously meta defining.
I do like, I mean, I wish it didn't have to be a brick of 50 of them, but I do like the idea. Like, a dragon isn't an impenetrable, like, immortal thing. It's not a god. It is a flesh and blood creature. I love the idea of it just getting filled with arrows or shot with a cannon. But, like, there's a balance there as to whether or not that should work every time.
Another thing,
and that's it.
Another thing, I mean, take another dragon for context, like Smaug. Like, Smaug was impenetrable unless you had the special weapon. And the special weapon does not have to be a cannonball, but we have universal magic items. The other simple answer is that there's some universal magic items, whether it be like a bound spell or something, that's just really...
Monster Slayer? Which which is just incredibly rare for whatever reason.
Yeah, there's a good example. Monster Slayer in combat. Like, I'm just talking about, I don't know, like a magic missile that has Monster Slayer, and you're like, okay, that sucks. Like, that's a thing. You know, like, I don't know, it does D3 plus 3 monster slaying hits, and you're like, right, okay, is that going to work? Like, is that not going to work? That's an interesting. Immediately, you kind of solve the issue, right, by giving everyone access to the ability to deal with the issue. Now, Old World doesn't really work like that. It's a game of haves and have-nots. Like, everyone's got a little way to deal with something else, and everyone's got their own problem piece. Peg Knights, Green Knight, Fanatics, you can kind of name them. So that would be another way to maybe a simpler way, or less elegant, but maybe more like resourceful. That there's just something you can pick. And also, like, I go, right, cool, I've spent my 100 points that I need on my Monster Slayer item. Okay, cool, I'm playing Dwarfs. Oh, that was rubbish. I didn't need that, as an example. Okay, so dragons, lots to talk about there. And then finally, your point on here is infantry. So how do you feel about infantry? What would you like to see?
Well, I think this is everyone's point. So right now, because one thing is that it's a little bit a bit of a misnomer that infantry sucks. I think it's just that a lot of infantry sucks right now. And so what is the main difference? And I think it's the infantry that has access to a lot of static combat res, the infantry that has access to quality attacks, quality strength attacks, can be raised from the dead. These infantry are doing just fine as sort of brick units that can be leveraged into being Death Stars or what have you. But I think that there's just so many more infantry units in the game that are more or less collecting dust on the shelf, or just they're just not a lot of fun. They don't really have a role in the game because of the way the core mechanics are done. And this again gets back to that sort of pastiche thing, and this is a deep rabbit hole I went down. But if you look at just static res, for example, so like static comp. So this is a game that's existed in one form or another for over 40 years now. And the ideas behind how combat resolution works might even predate that. I don't know where they came from. But as far back as I could look, 3 ranks got you +3 static combat res. If we look back at like 7th edition, which would be the closest comp to Old World, you had a better rank bonus, and you also had an outnumber bonus, which would, if your unit was larger, you would get a +1 combat res. And then on top of that, there was no close order out there that all monsters tend to have. So essentially what you have right now is, in Old World, they took the combat res chart from Warhammer Ancient Battles, and you can go look at it if you like, which had basically a static res of 2, so you could only get 2 rank bonus. However, close order was given essentially just to heavy infantry and elite infantry models, and it worked exactly like a rank bonus. It could be removed like a rank bonus, like if you were flank charged and disrupted, like all that kind of stuff worked exactly like a rank bonus. Only applied to heavy infantry, it would give you the +1, getting into that +3. And it was the way that they made a distinction between your heavy infantry and your open order infantry, which didn't get that extra static res.
Yeah.
And in a historical war game, there's not as many, there's not as much, disparity between unit types, because it's all just dudes, right? It's just dudes wearing different outfits, basically.
Just dudes.
They're all just human at the end of the day. But in Old World, they took that close order mechanic, gave it to everybody. So now everybody, including horses and monsters and stuff like that, get +1 for being alive. They made that the only combat res mechanic that's stackable. So if you have multiple of them in a combat, that's stacking. If you flanked the same unit twice, you only get +1. If you have 2 units with 3 ranks in each, you only get +3. So the only thing that stacks is this close order benefit. And basically what I'm trying to align here is that for whatever reason, they didn't really do the math and realize that infantry is probably sitting at, on average, -2 or -3 than they ever have in the game. So this traditional role that they would fulfill, which is being the anvil, something that, could take a punch and use the static combat res to make up for their lack of output, they just lost it, and they net really badly in that. So for me, that's an easy thing to just go back, go in and patch and give infantry a lot more of its static combat res back.
So just for me, like, I don't necessarily want static. I don't want combat blocks or infantry blocks to only be static combat res givers.
It's half of the equation.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Like, I'm happy for it to be half. I would like White Lions, like Swordmasters, to actually be fighting. Like, I think that's like, do you know what I mean? Like, when I see someone win with a flag, I'm like, I hate this. This sucks. Like, and I get it, like, especially thematically, but I want it to only be half of the convo. I want it to be like, I can fight. My dudes, no matter the situation, can have a fight.
You better be able to come over here and hurt me. Yeah. Because if you don't do a lot of damage to me, I'm just gonna ruck you just based on my static res. And also, by the way, I can fight too. So therefore, getting that charge in, having that initiative bonus, suddenly it matters, because that gives you the opportunity to rack up some combat res by dealing damage. But like the flip side of this too is in the 8th edition situation, which again, the way infantry worked in 8th edition was divisive, but it was a game where suddenly infantry, I think it's a classic like quadruple buff from Games Workshop, because infantry prior to 8th edition didn't have the output necessarily, except for certain elite options and things like that. They were mostly the static res and whatever chip damage they could do and their characters, etc. In 8th edition, suddenly you give them fight in 2 ranks by default, fight in 3 ranks if they're 10 wide. You give them their regular rank bonus. You give them the ability to be steadfast, i.e., they don't break. They do their combat resolution check on an unmodified dice roll if they outnumber. So like basically they're not running away and getting chased down. But you had like these bricks, so you just made it so that a big brick of infantry had the largest damage output potential, even if they were low quality attacks, just because you were rolling a bucket of dice. And also you removed a lot of the cool who gets the first charge stuff from the game, because they set it up so that there was step up in addition to fighting in extra ranks. So even if you wiped out 20 guys, if there was another 20 guys behind, all 20 of them got to swing anyway. And I think what they were trying to do there is make combats decisive. So they were trying to give infantry the ability to like come in and do a lot of damage and like not just wind up in these quagmires where like nobody's moving. They didn't realize that people would just extrapolate that, make their infantry bricks gigantic, make it so that you wind up in quagmires anyway with 100 rats or 150 goblins, whatever. And so you got a weird meta game, again, because the rules were too cooked. If you did the exact same thing, because we have Steadfast right now, don't tell anybody, but Steadfast exists. It's called Fallback in Good Order. It allows you to it's where combat, if you wonder where the combat reform went and where Steadfast went, it's Fallback in Good Order. It means that infantry can get ready to take another punch and doesn't just constantly get run down in the game. I think really the only thing you need to take away is step up. I think step up is the problem. I think not fighting in extra ranks. I think infantry should be able to fight and shoot in 2 ranks as a default thing. And what that makes it interesting is that means that if you do get to fight first against an infantry that can fight in 2 ranks, you can reduce, their ability to hit you back, but they still have something. They'll still likely be able to swing back with something, rather than right now where that fighting rank is wiped out. They don't get to do anything. All they have is static res. They may or may not lose the combat.
Yeah, it's a terrible shame when I will see someone run over, kill a rank of Chaos Warriors, and then like, no, those other Chaos Warriors wouldn't fight you. I'm like, no, like, and it's been probably my biggest bugbear straight from the start of the game, and I would like to see that immediately changed. And I really am hopeful that we will see that changed. That's, to me, like seeing 2 units, just one guy just not swinging feels so silly, especially when you, again, a lot of these problems, like you said, are compounding problems. When I've got something I can never charging me and making it so I can never fight, it becomes nothing, and that sucks.
And then because you're falling back in good order, that thing that fucked you up is now getting the charge bonus again. They're getting their initiative bonus. They're getting their lance back. You know, like so, like you just kick the can down the road right off the board if you want. You know, because they're constantly recharging that unit. So you know, the thing that sucks to me is that I think all the ingredients here make for one of like certainly the most dynamic game of Warhammer Fantasy that they've ever had.
Agreed.
It is just the tuning of it that's not there right now, which provides, I think, just please come close to some of this stuff on this errata, this FAQ coming up, and like I hope they see it like systemically as a core rules problem, so that they can you know, you change the things that you know you at least approach and understand some of the topics that we've talked on today, and you're just gonna make a game that's more fun. The game's already fun, but like it could be like really good.
Yeah, it could be really fun. Yeah.
Really good, and it's not too far. So
and also like the lease of life, like just step up. That's the only thing they do. The lease of life that someone will have. Imagine that's the only thing they do. When a dragon flies over, wipes out a couple of ranks of infantry, and even though they're just hitting them with clan rats, even though they're just hitting them with state troops, the fact that they'll roll 5 to 8 dice at a dragon will make them feel so happy. It's not like just
you get to play, you get to roll dice.
You get to play,
exactly.
yeah, you get to play, and like, and even if like that infantry block, the only thing it does is take 2 wounds off a dragon. That's amazing. Like they'll be pumped about that, right? So I think that's really cool. Now, like Val says,
maybe suddenly it wins, and you know that dragon flies away and rallies or whatever. And but like you got a game, like you got a dynamic game going on, rather than things being you know, predetermined in a lot of cases. Sorry, you were about to say something.
I was just going to say, like as Val said, the game is really fun and people are really enjoying it with new formats all the time. New missions are going to be in that match play guidebook. Let's get a better name. Come on, SDS. And then let us know in the comments below which of these changes are most impactful to you and what you'd like to see most. Because I think everyone's going to have their own little, they're all going to be in their own little trenches about their own little things, for sure. And I'd love to know what everyone thinks. And then Val, this has been really fun. What's really fun about this is all the hope before we get to see the actual thing.
Fingers crossed.
Big fingers crossed. Let us know what you think. Thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone on Patreon. See you all soon. Goodbye.